Growing wider as a parish is fulfilling the Great Commission. Jesus told us, "Go therefore and make disciples." Growing wider also means building a culture which strives to serve those who have never come to church and those who haven't been to church in a long time. This begins with hospitality and calling upon parishioners who are in the pews to get out of the pews and serve. Today, we've got Ed Bradley back in the studio to help us deep dive into the Grow Wider anchor. Here we go. Well, hi there, Ed. Thank you for joining us again today.
Hi, Melissa. Great to be with you again. Happy to be here.
Well, we're just excited to have you as our resident expert on the Rebuilt framework and all things Rebuilt strategic anchors. So
I always bristle at that, but I'm happy to try to be a resource and have some fun with you. And also it's good to know that we have lots of experts in the Rebuilt community about this. But I'm happy to share what I can.
Well, thank you. So to get us started, we are now exploring our second of the Rebuilt strategic anchors, Grow Wider. But just to remind everyone, can you please review what are our four strategic anchors?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And it's important to remember that we talk about, strategic traits that successful churches share. And that's sort of the starting point here. It's not a nativity cult, thing. It's not anything other than, at the end of the day, making each parish the best version of themselves by leaning into these strategic traits. And so let me just do it really, really quick, just to remind us. And I like to do this in sort of like an elevator speech fashion, because I think it's language that it's good for all of us in parish leadership to kind of get familiar, get comfortable with sort of this. And you'll find your own rhythm to it. But for me, it's, the anchors begin with a burden, if you will. It's a hunger for who isn't coming to our church, and that we want to grow wider as a church. We want to have that evangelistic attitude, and so we build a culture that welcomes people. So then when they come, they have an awesome experience. And so that's the Mass is the source in some of our faith. So we create an excellent weekend Mass experience. And that's driven by music, message, and ministry primarily, but there are other elements to that as well. So we welcome outsiders. When they come, they have an awesome experience. That calls them deep into their faith. And the great Mass calls all of us deeper into our faith. And so we are all called to grow deeper in our faith. And that's the third anchor, is to shape a clear discipleship path for people. What are the practices that people can be undertaking that's going to call them deeper into their faith? And we as parish leaders need to put into place the ministry or the systems that undergird those experiences, so we grow deeper in our faith. And everything in the parish comes together with leadership. It's not just at the top, although that's an important part of it, a senior team surrounding the pastor, but it really cascades from there. And you're creating you're authorizing and empowering staff who are then encouraged to build layers of leadership underneath them that creates a leadership community. Those are the four strategic anchors. Today we're going to be talking about the one I like to speak about first, although we're because of the way I do that elevator speech, but we already talked about the weekend experience. Today we're going to be talking about growing wider.
That's right. Well, Ed, what are some of those key elements within that Grow Wider anchor?
Right. As we're going through this, and as we did with the weekend experience, each of these strategic traits, the strategic anchors, as we refer to them, have executing elements. What do you in fact do? And so for each, we have identified kind of 6 executing elements. And we like to show them visually and here's my little cheat sheet, in a flywheel. Oh, there you go, too. Melissa, there you go. And that flywheel look is intentional to sort of these are things that are not you do this once, you said it, you forget it. These are all, acts of ongoing motion, right? Try something, evaluate it, tweak it, improve, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. So, when we talk about the executing elements of Grow Deeper, we start with all of these usually at the top of this flywheel with more of a macro cultural, idea. And this one's no different, is to build a culture that welcomes newcomers and welcomes people. And so, it starts there. And we're going to step through these one at a time. The next one is to identify your target audience, develop an invest and invite strategy, create a compelling digital presence, provide exceptional kids and student programs. Then that shows up in multiple anchors. And then a newcomer engagement path needs to be set. So those are the 6. And Melissa, you can kind of start to step us through those, I guess.
Okay. Well, before we even get into those, I first want to ask you why. Why is it important to build a culture that welcomes people? Why is that crucial for parish growth?
Yeah, and culture, the 2 words that I lean into there are the why. Why is Grow Wider? Why is this even, a place where we start? Or why is this something that we include in our strategic anchors? Matthew 28, right? Go and make disciples of all nations. So we are called scripturally to go forth and share the gospel. So we need to have that burden to grow wider. Also, Jesus came to serve, but he also called his disciples to become fishers of men. And so we are again called to be reaching out and seeking, and also he said, seek the lost. And so, we're called into evangelization in many ways. And the other why to this one is that growth matters to God. We see it in Acts of the Apostles time and again where, the early church is going, something's occurring in the Acts of the Apostles scripture, and sort of the end of it is, and many were added to their number, that day, or 500 were added, or some number. And so that's, interesting that's consistently sort of in scripture there in the life of the early church, that growth matters, and it does matter to God. So that's the why we should have this burden in the first place. But then also it is a culture that the word culture there means it infuses the congregation, it infuses the parish, it gets into the blood of all of us, not just leadership. And that's a process, when you start to see all the anchors tying together and you see the discipleship path and you see serving, for example, when you're establishing this culture of welcoming people, what's part of that is people serving in hospitality and at the welcome desk and in the kids wing and in many ways that creates that energy and vibe of welcoming to outsiders. And so that's a cultural shift in the minds of invest and invite is a cultural shift in terms of I have a role to play in our growing wider. So all of these things matter, and growth matters. It matters to God. And churches aren't just automatically, people just aren't automatically coming anymore as well. And so that's why it's important to kind of have that culture, because we have to really, really be intentional about seeking the newcomer and then welcoming them when they come. So there's a lot there in that just sort of little macro phrase, create a culture that welcomes people.
Well, Ed, thank you. That was so helpful. And as we dive deeper, we're going to get into each of these elements. And the first one that I want to talk about is identifying your target audience. Now, you know that I'm in marketing, and so one of the first things we need to do when we are marketing is identify our target audience. And as a parish, that's also what we need to do, so we know who we're trying to reach. So, Ed, how can parishes effectively identify their target audience?
You know, this can be at times feel a little tricky. I don't want to get into a sort of, a deep complexity of you have to do deep demographic analysis and whatnot. I mean, I think there are certain elements of growing wider that are kind of intuitive to everybody. I mean, I think now your parish may be in an area that simply doesn't have a lot of young families. If you're in a sort of vacation area or, seasonal place or whatnot. But I think we could all say that most parishes need to get younger. And so, we have to be intentional about, and we'll talk about the, kids programs in that regard. And that maybe addresses that a little bit. So one sort of common target audience is going to be young families, perhaps, right? And so, but at the same time, you're going to have some demographic thinking to do, or what is your zip code look like? Who is that community, and who are we in fact aiming for? So really, at the end of the day, this is supposed to kind of be thoughtful in your marketing strategies, in your social media strategy, and in the programs that you're offering that are going to be attractive and welcoming to folks that are going to be available to you to sort of be pulling in. But it does, I think, younger is a big one generally. But just to be thoughtful about the specific demographics of your mission field, which is sort of generally your zip code.
Definitely, I agree. And I think one place to start where it's pretty simple is you can walk into Mass and look around and see who's there and who's not there. And that can help you identify that as well.
And then when you start to think about, okay, who are we trying to attract, that thoughtfulness or that intentionality, it's, if you have, hopefully you're building a hospitality team, get on the front door of your parish folks who represent sort of your target audience, right? So like attracts like, if you will. And sort of that's just sort of a simple kind of way to be thinking about it. I mean, Nativity, we did identify kind of a 40-year-old young family, a guy who went to a Catholic school. A lot of those that, maybe went to Mass in high school and then stopped going when he went away to college. And now he's got a young family and he's feeling that burden a little bit about, bringing his kids back and his family back. So Timonium Tim was sort of shaped with kind of that in mind. That doesn't mean that's yours.
Right.
But at the same time, there's an intentionality behind it and someone you're aiming for.
Thank you. Well, Ed, you talked about having an invest and invite strategy. So my question for you is, what does that entail and how can parishes implement this?
Yeah, among all the 24, this one shows up actually in a couple places. There, if you have 4 anchors and 6 for each, that's 24 executing elements. Invest and invite is high on the list, I think, in terms of a healthy parish and what it represents. If you have a lot of people, this shows up here in the idea of growing wider. It shows up in the share your faith part of the discipleship path. It also reflects sort of cultural buy-in on the part of your congregation, that they're in this with you. They're engaged in the parish. They want to share it. It gets linked to the weekend experience because, as I'll talk about in a minute, the invest and invite represents a covenant really with your congregation in terms of excellence as to what people are inviting they are invitee too. So invest and invite is the idea that you call upon your congregation to become your sales force and your advocates and your ambassadors in the community for what you're trying to do in the parish. And so encourage people to be investing in the people in their lives, whether it's their family, their coworkers, their friends, and I like to say the folks they encounter on the sidelines of their kids' sports, because first of all, that's a place of competition for us in terms
For
of
sure.
time at Mass. So, invest in people. And then when the time is right, invite them to church. And there's a lot in that, in terms of a lot you're calling upon people to do. So, they might be worried about making that invitation, or how does that feel to them? So give them some tools to make that easy. If you're starting a new message series, we advocate message series. We talked about that in the Weekend Experience Anchor. When one is starting in a couple of weeks, give them little postcards that would allow them to hand that to somebody. That would be, and it might have some artwork on the front, the name of the series, and on the back it would have a little description of the series, and it would have the times of masses. And this is just something you can pass out at church a couple of weeks before a series starts, and then people can just hand them to those people who they are investing in, if the time is right, to invite them to church. So that's sort of a simple tool to provide folks to make that invitation. But the other important thing is that you want to be making sure that what they're inviting people to is excellent, and so that they are never embarrassed by making that invitation, and that they're going to feel good and confident about making the invitation, because people will in fact have a great experience. And so that's where the Awesome Weekend Experience comes in, and that's that covenant that you have. So invest and invite is a very, very important sort of idea to be putting in front of your congregation, and hopefully more and more and more will buy into that, and that will help you grow wider.
Oh, thank you. And you're so right. When you are investing, some key things I took from that, Ed, are: one, it's got to be inviting them when the time is right, not just going in and inviting them right away. It's got to be after that relationship has been built. And then that second part that you said really hit home, where make sure what you're inviting them to is something excellent and something that they're going to want to come back to. And I think that's a key piece for our parish leaders to think about.
Unquestionably, we have that covenant with our congregation, and then what they're going to want them to come back to, but also we're going to welcome them when they come, and we're going to have a welcome desk, and we're going to follow up with people. We'll give them a gift and invite them back directly, and try to engage them on an engagement path. But it does certainly start with the invitation. As to lots of things we talk about when we talk about later the steps of discipleship and a discipleship path. Encouraging people into service is all about making the invitation a lot of the time. And it's no different here in terms of the invitation to church.
For sure. Well, Ed, you've talked about having this compelling digital presence, and we are in this digital age now. So how important is it for parishes to have this compelling digital presence, and what are some of those key elements they should focus on?
If somebody invites me to your parish, I'm going to probably bring up the website, that's going to be we call it the front door, or the first encounter. Someone naturally is going to go to the website first. And so you want that experience digitally to be excellent. It needs to be clear what people are asked to do, what information you have on there, that it's current, it doesn't look tired, it doesn't look like no one's paid attention to it. All of those things. It should be attractive and welcoming, and clear. And so that's maybe a step one, to think about your digital presence from a website perspective. And that carries over into social media as well, that there's a little bit of fun to it, that you kind of feel like there's an energy maybe, there that I might want to look into or be a part of. So fun, engaging energy in the website and in social media strategy is important. Front door, first encounter. We talked about the online campus. I think that has the campus portion of that has deeper implications for the weekend experience anchor than here the grow wider anchor. Although, someone is going to maybe, instead of coming to Mass first, they might watch a Mass,
right?
Or they might watch a past Mass. So the online experience from a campus, from the online Mass perspective is important. And we talked about this a little bit, you have a whole further conversation about the place of online in the context of, because we want people to come here. But we also have to recognize the modern digital world and that reality of that potential encounter online. So let's make everything we do, the in-person and the online, great. Of course, we want people to come in person, but we make that engagement excellent online as well. So those are the elements of the digital side. There might be stuff I'm missing there, but just think about it from that newcomer's perspective, that you're on your game, it's current, it's up to date, it's fresh, there's energy. I want to be a part of something it feels like there's something there. I want to go check it out.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
For sure. And I love how you talked about the website is the front door to their church. And something that we've heard in the past too is social media is like that handshake. So before they ever even step foot on your campus, they have the opportunity to shake your hand and go to your front door. And they'll make a decision at that point whether or not they want to actually get in their car and step foot on your campus. So I'm in agreement there with you, Ed, that we have got to have this great digital presence if we want people to actually come onto our campus.
Absolutely. Well said. Yep. Good stuff.
Well, one of those key elements of this Grow Wider anchor is providing exceptional kids and students programs. And you talked about how we need to grow younger, and I think this is what you were alluding to here. So what strategies have you seen work when implementing some of these programs to engage the younger members?
Yeah, and for many of them, they have collateral positivity with regard to the older members, or particularly the young parents as well. But it's often been said, if you do something nice for my kid, you do something nice for me, and there's a lot of truth to that. So all of those sort of collateral things, but front and center is the experience of the next generation, and bringing kids and young people into a life of faith and sharing the gospel with them at an age appropriate way. So the first order of business is engaging children and students in awesome experiences, whether that's during Mass, in a children's liturgy of the word. Well, the nursery and young children elements of your kids' programs. First of all, the nursery is what it is, but then that sort of 2 to 5 year olds, those they can have a great experience with a little bit of a Bible story and a craft, and we have children with great relationships with some of our adults there that they look forward to being with. And if kids are waking up Sunday morning like wanting to go, that's really important. But the other thing that the nursery and the young kids, it does free up the parents to have a very good Mass experience where they are, engaging in the homily and in the worship, and they have a deeper experience. So that there's that benefit. So that goes both directions. Then during Mass, that K through 6 kind of children's liturgy of the word, if you make that energetic and fun and age appropriate message delivery, they're going to want to come back to that. Right. And that's an important, again, a thing to be attracting the young families. And again, during the homily that will free up the parents to engage fully in the homily and whatnot. So, and the kids programs aren't that hard to implement in terms of you can get into, the families can actually kind of co-op ministry and do maybe once a month rotations in terms of the nursery and some of the younger stuff. But we get plenty of volunteers for that. Children's liturgy of the word, you can get focused on that and implement that, I think, relatively easily. So the important thing, lots there certainly, but capture the kids, you capture the parents, but then good engaged programs also allow the parents to have a deeper experience in Mass. So it's a win-win-win kind of all the way around. And that will really help you grow younger as a community.
And I can just tell you, when I hear you talking about how when you have this nursery and when you have children's liturgy of the word, how it frees up the parents to truly listen to the homily and engage in the Mass distraction free. I think back to when I had a toddler and an infant and how much I would have loved that. Part of the issue of coming to Mass, that when I look at why young families aren't coming, it's because it is really hard when you've got a toddler trying to leave and an infant crying. I mean, Ed, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but my husband would take my 2-year-old outside for walks sometimes because we didn't have all of that back then. Once they ended up at Burger King for pancakes. I mean, we can do so much better for our parishes than that. So I can relate. And I think that once parishes start implementing these programs, their young families are going to feel so much more welcome and they're going to see that growth happen.
And I was about to say, yeah, but you can still go for pancakes. We all love pancakes. At the same time, I would say that's where a great cafe comes into play with sort of donuts and stuff for after Mass. That in terms of welcoming outsiders and young families and all that, it's not insignificant to have a nice little sort of place after Mass for fellowship, but also a little treat for the kids. So
right, absolutely. And it's one of those things too where, hey, let's, if you go and you're not complaining and, we have a good experience, you get a donut after Mass. I'm not above bribery as a parent.
It's not about the donuts, and we all know that, but that's also that's like a fact of life in parenting sometimes. But if the programs themselves, I say we have lots and lots of stories of kids who are like waking up Sunday morning is like, do we get to go to Mass today? And
yes.
And a lot of that is with the relationships they're building with these sort of adult servant ministers, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. So yep,
for sure. Well, once we get these newcomers in the door, then what do we do with them is the question. And so one of our key elements is implementing that newcomer engagement plan. So what are some steps that parishes can take to welcome their newcomers? What does that look like?
Yeah, it does start with the intentionality of a hospitality ministry, and we would strongly encourage a welcome desk in your narthex, in your lobby, and a place to invite people to at Mass. We encourage folks to, at the end of Mass, we would avoid announcements. We would more encourage you to be reinforcing the central message of the homily. And then also, if you're new, we're glad you're here. We have a gift for you. Invite people to the welcome desk. And so, yes, you have a little package and you have a little maybe gift, and the gift can be anything. It could be tchotchke from the parish. It could be a $5 gift card it could be a free donut in the cafe. It doesn't matter. But it's important to draw people to the desk and then to capture their information. But then importantly, hopefully the hospitality ministers who are manning the hospitality desk as part of their ministry, maybe the middle of that week, they are in the habit of, if anybody showed up new that week, they maybe send them an email that says, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I met you this weekend. It was great to meet you. I hope you come back. Hey, and if you come back, look for me. I'd love to meet you, spend some more time with you. Give that a personal touch, and a welcoming touch. And so that the people feel like there's something, they're a part of something a little bit. And so there's that. Then there's also, you should have either, monthly, maybe quarterly, a new parishioner welcome meeting that everybody gets invited to. We call that access point, and it's where folks can get a deeper dive into kind of, the culture and of the parish and learn about ways to get involved. And at that, they in fact get invited to get engaged. So welcome them real time, follow up, invite them to a new parishioner thing, and then introduce them, and we're going to talk about later, the grow deeper, the steps of discipleship, and be inviting them into growing as a disciple when they serve or when they engage in a small group or talk to them about prayer and the sacraments or sharing their faith with others. So we'll talk about grow deeper a little bit as Melissa unfolds and unpacks these anchors through these weeks. But all of those things are important to that newcomer sort of growing both in their faith and in their engagement in the parish.
And I think that it's so important to share that having a plan in place is going to change everything, because it's one thing to say, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. And then never talk to that parishioner again. But wow, what a difference you can make when you engage with that parishioner by getting their contact information after giving them the gift, of course, then following up with them, letting them know you want to see them again and talk with them, and then invite them to something else, like you talked about, access point, where then they can see how they can then grow deeper in their faith and in the parish community. I mean, you're taking that relationship and you're really making it relational. It's not just oh, hey, you're just a number here. It's making a connection with that person.
And absolutely, because it's all about, at the end of the day, sharing the gospel and helping people grow in their faith. And so that requires engagement and connection, and not just, as you said, not just oh, hey, hi, good to see you,
right.
More really kind of leaning into each other.
Yes. Well, and I know that you teach some of our courses and you coach some of our parishes, and I would love to know, can you share a success story or an example of a parish that you've interacted with that have implemented some of these strategies about growing wider, and maybe share a lesson that people could learn?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we hear that I do a lot of, and I'm thinking of a couple particular parishes that I both taught in the classes, but also hands-on coach. One of the things about this culture that welcomes people is, and we talk about it when we talk about serving in ministry, or we talk about music message ministers in the weekend experience, and what the ministers create, welcoming attitude, hospitality, and that's about like the feeling of the parish on the weekend, the energy. And so the success story is built around hospitality generally, and it is also where we encourage people to start a lot of the time, like, where do I get started? Well, start with opening the front door, and having a welcome desk and just, and people will catch notice of that. So I think the success stories start with, energy and vibe, and that the hospitality elements of the weekend, of the growing wider idea. And so, that's really the one I would point to the most. Some of the others take a little bit of time to implement. So I really, really try to encourage people into leaning into, the energy created by a vibrant hospitality. And that's what I would say is the most common, most prevalent sort of success story in this anchor that we hear from. some of the other ones, certainly an engagement path are important. They're a little less sexy, if you will, than
Right.
than sort of the energy created by kind of hospitality. That's the biggie.
And we love to talk about low hanging fruit too when it comes to, what can you implement pretty easily that will still make a big impact. And you keep mentioning the welcome desk. And I want to reiterate how simple but yet effective having a welcome desk in your parish is. That's one of those key points where all people can be directed to not just be welcomed, but then also take care of parish business as well. It's kind of a twofer, which we love it. That was something that we were able to implement in our parish in just a matter of weeks. And it can be as simple. We started out with just a simple little stand with a Chromebook on top. And then it's kind of morphed into something even bigger. But what a great way to have some place to direct people to, whether they're new or already an active member within the parish.
Yeah, 100%. And I like to always think about and speak about the collateral benefits of certain things that you do. And so the nature of a very visible welcome desk in the middle of the lobby, in the middle of the narthex, does a couple of collateral things. Certainly, first of all, it's a place to invite people to. It's a place to take care of business. It's a place to capture information. It's a place to do all the things with the newcomer. But the other thing it does is it shouts to everybody who shows up that we care about the newcomer. We care about who's showing up that day. So even if I've been coming for 10 years, hey, my parish cares about the newcomer. Maybe I ought to care a little bit more about that. And maybe there is somebody I can be inviting here. And maybe I have a role to play in that. So it's those cultural sort of collateral benefits that a visible, prominent welcome desk also creates.
Definitely. Well, Ed, we know that with everything in parish renewal, there are challenges. What challenges have you seen parishes face as they're trying to implement some of these strategies in the Grow Wider anchor?
Well, I guess sometimes you'll have the classic culture change, sort of roadblocks that people who just want to come at that mass and sit in that seat and when you're calling them on, the full description of this with regard to this anchor in this that you showed, it talks about building a culture that welcomes people, but that also calls upon parishioners coming to get out of the pews and serving and helping to create that energy, that vibe, that welcoming culture. And so, that's going to take a little bit of time to build that culture and to call people out of the pews to serve. So, and in the discipleship path area, where I think I'll be back for that, and we could talk a little bit about flipping that switch. That's not about the parish needs me to serve. It's that I grow as a disciple when I serve, right. And so, that helps you sort of call upon people to get out of the parish and serve, but out of the pews and serves. But anyway, as with everything, we do need to create that energy. We do need to create that vibe. We do need people for that. So you need to be consistent in that invitation. At the same, and there will be some folks who I just want to come to mass. And, so
yep.
that's I guess I would call that to be a roadblock. But if you're just positive and consistent in your messaging, and that you want this for folks, for their growth and discipleship, and they'll get it. They'll catch on.
For sure, definitely. And I think sometimes if you allocate some resources to that as well, we know that volunteers aren't free, but when volunteers, those who are already volunteering in ministry, when they share how they're being poured into, whether it's through training or recognition or how they're being filled and they feel that as an act of worship, when they start spreading that organically to the others within the pews will start to follow. And that, you say that culture takes time, and it does. But that is a big part of that culture shift for sure.
Servers invite two friends and they invite two friends and so on and so on. But yet the pouring into the, a separate space for fellowship from, ministers area, folks come to count on that. They count on it for community and yeah, there's a lot there, but yeah, you pour into them, you make the investment. It's not a big investment, but it's intentional, and it's important to do that. Absolutely, Melissa. Yep.
Definitely. Well, Ed, as we wrap up, what advice do you have for parishes that are just getting started with focusing on growing wider?
Yeah, I think it does start with a burden. Okay. I mean, it does start with, whether you can magically capture that burden. I think we have it. We just need to lean into it a little bit, really from a parish leadership perspective, receive and welcome the burden of like, who isn't coming. Right.
Yes.
And to then, share that in a positive. I'm talking about a positive burden. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
A yearning, if you will, a burden to, who isn't coming, who needs to hear, who's the unchurched and the lost, who do we need to bring the gospel to? So lean into that and then share that, and to lead consistently and positively in that direction. So I would say to be very, very consistent. And the other word I would use is intentional about that. So when you be intentional about who you're aiming for, be intentional about inviting people into it to create the energy in that culture, be intentional about having systems in place to help people make the invitation, to be intentional about, hey, we really need to have a good children's liturgy of the word in order to grow younger. Be intentional about making sure your website is current. Be, intentional about having a welcome desk and inviting people to it consistently, and all of those things. But it begins with, because, we have this yearning to bring more and more people, the gospel. So, intentionality, consistency, leadership, positivity, all of it.
Definitely. And when you talk about intentionality, I just think of an example that I heard from another parish where they encouraged their parishioners to think about who they wanted to have at Mass that year at Christmas, and pray for that person, and work on, that invest and invite strategy ahead of time. And it can be as simple as, like, oh, well, I hope my in-laws come, or my grandchildren, or I want my kids to come back, whoever that is. That's all still growing wider. That's welcoming the unchurched and the dechurched, those who have never been to Mass, and those who haven't been in a long time. And so it can be as simple as starting with a conversation for people. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said consistency, getting started and then continuing on. Sometimes it can be easy to give up because, let's be honest, parish work can be difficult, especially when you're trying to renew and rebuild your parish. But consistently working with intention can make those big improvements happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's faithful, consistent work in this kind of same direction. And again, that gets back to flywheels spinning, evaluate, improve, tweak, implement, evaluate, tweak, improve.
I'm so glad to hear.
And just be patient with yourselves,
Yes. Yeah. And I'm so glad to hear you say evaluate multiple times, because that's actually what we've got as a gift for our listeners today. we have a Grow Wider evaluation where I'm going to put the link in our show notes, but you can also go to rebuiltparish.com/wider evaluation. So rebuiltparish.com/wider evaluation. And in there, you'll have an evaluation that you and your team can fill out. And that will help you gauge where you are right now with growing wider, and will help you put together a plan so that you can take some action steps on making an improvement on growing wider in your parish.
Yeah, it's a series of kind of questions that kind of guides a leadership team conversation. There are some ideas in it also for low-hanging fruit that Melissa mentioned earlier, in terms of easy to implement ideas, and then maybe some longer-term priorities. But you're going to in the conversation, in the discussion, in the working as a team, you're going to sort of identify kind of what's specifically applicable to you. But yeah, it's a good tool, and I encourage you to make good use of it.
For sure. Well, Ed, thank you once again for coming and deep diving and sharing with everyone all about this anchor. We are so grateful for you.
Thank you, Melissa. Always pleasure to be with you. Love your energy, and keep it rolling. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners, our community out there. We're so grateful that you're here with us, and we'll see you next week.